Hi everyone, my name is Djuradj Vujcic, aka George. Welcome to the Urban Book Circle show. My guest today is Michael Lewis. Michael Lewis is an award-winning journalist who has covered the game of soccer for almost 5 decades. He has attended and written about 13 World Cups, 8 men's and 5 women's, and 10 Olympic soccer finals, and just about every level of the beautiful game. He is the author of his newest book, which is called Alive and Kicking, the incredible but true story of the Rochester Lancers, which is why he is joining me today. And he will be joining me right now. Hello, Mr. Lewis. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me on. Looking forward to our chat about soccer and the Lancers.
Yes, me as well. I guess I've been plowing through this book, Alive and Kicking, but I guess I should start. Let's say, for example, someone does not know about the Rochester Lancers and the North American Soccer League. How would you introduce this book?
Rochester Lancers were one of the almost original teams in the North American Soccer League. They joined in 1970. They helped save the league. The league was down to 4 teams. They joined the league, and so did the Washington team, the Washington Darts, and the league went up to 6 teams, and they survived to add the Cosmos, Pelé, and essentially help plant the seeds of what we see in North American soccer today. And saying that, they had many an adventure along the way. That includes a number of Canadians, many Canadians that were an essential part of the team's history. I could not write the history of this team without including such players as Mike Stojanovic, Branko Segota, Pat Urkeley, Dick Howard, and there were so many others as well too. But it basically, I wrote the book because I felt the Lancers were the antithesis of the Cosmos. The Cosmos had all this money. The Lancers had local owners, passionate owners, but they were a community team essentially until their final couple of years. And it was an intriguing story to tell and to educate the public, to let them know that soccer isn't just what MLS is these days. There were some interesting pioneering days as well. Sorry for the long soliloquy.
No, not at all. So, would you say that without the NASL, there would be no soccer in North America today?
Most likely, I mean, maybe it would have come about in another way, but there's no doubt the NASL planted the seeds for what we see today. I mean, when Pelé came over and you added Cruyff, Carlos Alberto, Franz Beckenbauer, Giorgio Canaglia, I'm probably forgetting a few other, George Best. Even though they were at the end of their careers, they got people interested in soccer. It started a youth soccer boom, at least in the United States. And I always thought Canada was a step ahead of U.S. in soccer up until the NASL days. And I think things sort of evened out within a number of years. But it helped, like I said, plant the seeds. It took a while. People didn't go crazy about the game. You needed the players, those young players, to play the game at a high level, reach the World Cup. You know, Canada did it in '86. U.S. broke a 40-year drought in the World Cup desert in 1990. And you needed that passion and excitement to build. And as we found out, adding women's national teams, just helped multiply what we have today.
As I was flipping through the book, when I first got it, I noticed that you have a lot of insider stories. How do you have all these stories, for example, from the change rooms and certain players didn't get along and that kind of thing? Where does this information come from?
Well, some of it, it's a combination of things. The Lancers, I'll give you a quick background. Lancers were around for 14 years. I covered them for 6 years, and I always wanted to write a book about them just because of all this stuff that was happening. Did research from newspapers, There were some interesting stories there. From what I covered the team for the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, and talking to players over the years. It's incredible what you find when you ask basic, simple questions. And sometimes I'd mention something to a player and they would just say, "Oh yeah, about this." And you start putting these stories together, whether it was unusual plane rides, players wanting to be traded all the time. Mike Stojanovic wanted to be traded every year. I think it was just a tactic of trying to get more money. By the way, Stojanovic made $25,000 in his prime, and we're talking about one of the best strikers in NASL history. I don't know what he'd be making today, but I like to think it would be at least six figures, maybe seven figures overseas. But I'm not trying to get off tangent too much. But I really think the putting all this together, I just thought the Lancers had an intriguing story to tell. And I felt this is the way to do it. Yes, I understand it takes a while to get through the book. It's not a quick read by any means, unless you're a super duper fast reader. But I promise you, there is an adventure on like every page or every other page.
You mentioned the late Mike Stojanovic, who a name that my family always likes hearing about. And you mentioned how little he made, but how good of a striker he was. So how did the NASL manage to entice these players to come over? Because they had some big names, but the pay was not really what it is today.
Well, I think for Pelé, the Cosmos were owned by Warner Communications. They had millions they could pay him, no doubt about it. For Stojanovic, he wanted to get out of what was then Yugoslavia, and any way he can. And he actually went to Canada first, playing for the Serbian White Eagles in Toronto. And that's probably another chapter and a half, which I don't even know about, because at the time, the National Soccer League of Canada probably could have taken on the NASL in many ways. They had so many talented players then. But Stojanovic played in Canada for 2 years, filled the net for the White Eagles. As it turned out, his coach on the White Eagles was Don Popovic, a.k.a. Dragon Popovic. And when Popovic became coach of the Lancers in 1976, he had to bring his number one goal scorer with him. Stojanovic scored, I believe, 56 goals one season, 42 in another. He wasn't going to reach those heights in the NASL, but he certainly was one dangerous player. It's funny about another thing about Stojanovic. At the time, he was his weakness was that he only had 1 foot, essentially. He could score with his right foot. Didn't like to score with his head a lot. Rarely scored with his left foot. But today, people just don't care. Like I said, he would be making lots of money because he was a goal scorer. It doesn't really matter what foot, what head you use, whether you're heading the ball in. If you're going to be a goal scorer, they'll find room for you on your squad. And especially the way Europe is now, paying millions of dollars for players, there's no doubt in my mind he would be playing for a top team and possibly starring for them as well. He had a big ego. I think or I shouldn't say every, but many strikers have big egos. And he was always good for a story. Even when I didn't even ask a question directly about something, he would tell me something controversial on his end, which would give me an interesting story. He was fun to write about in that way, but fun to watch too. The incredible thing about Mike Stojanovic was that he smoked at least a pack of cigarettes a day, and he was one of the fastest players in the league. He could run through a brick wall. He was that strong as well too. So you're talking strength and speed. What a combination he was. It was a joy to watch, and unfortunately, as you know, he passed away way too early in 2010 from stomach cancer. But what a great goal scorer he was during his prime.
I learned a lot about those days. You sent me back in the day when I was a strapping young lad, 19-year-old aspiring journalist. You sent me an article you wrote about Stojanovic and the Rochester Lancers. So I really appreciated that. And ever since then, I've had a big interest about this league and those days because I find that era isn't really written about that often. And
Yeah.
I noticed that there's a forward. Oh, sorry, sorry to interrupt.
No, go on. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I was going to say I noticed there's a forward by Shep Messing, and he actually played for obviously Rochester, but he played for the Cosmos as well. And is he another interesting, outspoken figure from those days?
Oh, that would be an understatement. The interesting thing about Shep Messing when he played for the Cosmo or when he played for the Lancers was that he commuted to games. He would, which is unusual for any player to do, let alone a goalkeeper who you think would need to communicate and coordinate with his back four. The incredible thing about it was there was no communication problems at all. I know that sounds absurd. Obviously, today you couldn't pull that off. We all know about national team players leaving teams, coming back in, playing within a day or two, or even goalkeepers can do that even quicker than field players. But Shep was someone who was willing to speak his mind, wasn't afraid of it. He still is as a commentator for the New York Red Bulls TV broadcast. And yes, when he played for the Lancers in 1979, he wound up in many of my pieces about the team for obvious reasons. Uh, you're talking about a star. This was the Lancers superstar because he played for the Cosmos, was I think a spokesman for a tobacco chewing company as well too. That had TV commercials, which was a big deal at the time because very few players, let alone American players, had sponsorship deals. So you put that all together, and he also had a book out that was co-authored by David Hershey, The Education of an American Soccer Player. So you put all that together, and he was a hot property at the time.
How, for example, you mentioned all the players from the former Yugoslavia and how they kind of used this league as a way to get away from communism, and not just Yugoslavia, but other countries as well. Do you think that maybe that's why they played so fiercely and why they left their kind of like dent on this league?
I definitely agree with that. I remember I had many a conversation with Don Popovich. By the way, in the media, and when I wrote about him, I called him Dragon Popovich, his given name. First of all, it's his given name, and two, let's face it, with a name like Dragon, and after the Lancers lose, you love to have a headline: Dragon breathes fire after Lancers loss. But I spoke many a time about to Don Dragon about his life in the United States, and he just loved it here. And when I say the United States, I should also say Canada as well too, because you're talking about freedom of speech, having the ability to do things, not worrying about having someone looking over your shoulder or doing something. And I know that he enjoyed having that opportunity to be here. And even though I didn't speak with many of the players about that, except for maybe Stojanovic, I think most of them, if not all of them, would have agreed about that, being able to be in a country where you could say anything you want and you're not going to get arrested or in trouble or whatever.
The Rochester Lancers still exist, but in a different form. Obviously, back then, that was the top level of soccer in North America. Do people still follow the Rochester Lancers that play nowadays?
Yeah, there are several incarnations of them. They've had an indoor team, a men's outdoor team that plays in the that has played in the National Premier Soccer League. They took a couple of years off because of COVID. They hope to return next year. And there's a Lady Lancers, a women's team that played this year and missed out on reaching the playoffs by a goal. Goals differential count. So they are still around. They are, pardon the pun, alive and kicking, but not at the same level as the NASL. There are also there are two professional teams in Rochester, men's teams. Flower City Union that play in the National Independent Soccer Association. And then there's the Rochester, New York FC that competes in MLS Next Pro. They're essentially both third division teams and leagues, but they don't draw as many fans as the Lancers once did. Let's face it, one of the drawing cards, having your own team in a major league like the NASL was a big deal, but when a team like the Cosmos came to town with all their stars, Los Angeles with Johan Cruyff, or when he was with the Washington Diplomats. And then there was the Toronto Metro's Croatia, who they had a big Croatian following and backing, and the Lancers had a number of Serbians or non-Croatians who, let's say they didn't get along, and it made for some intriguing confrontations. I'll have to admit, I learned a lot about the history of that part of Eastern Europe in a hurry. And back in those days, did not have the internet. I had to look things up in newspapers and periodicals, and it took a lot longer and talking to various people. And which was, by the way, another reason why I enjoy covering this beautiful game of soccer, because I get to learn world history in a unique way. I know I got off base there with the answer.
You mentioned briefly indoor soccer, and I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that because I interviewed Mike Vujcic back in the day, and he said that indoor soccer was huge in the States and in Canada, but really in the States. And why do you think that indoor soccer isn't really that huge as it was back then?
Well, I think it was new at the time. I know people were complaining about outdoor soccer being slow, low scoring, very few scoring opportunities. Indoor soccer, you blink and you could miss a goal or two. Especially then, that was a big deal. You had a number of pioneering owners who decided to take a shot, and they probably realized they were going to lose a lot of money, maybe not as much as they did. And it became the in thing for a number of years. And especially when the North American Soccer League went to folded after the 1984 season, there was no professional soccer in the States at all. So outdoor soccer. So all people had to look forward to was indoor soccer. And a lot of those NASL players played in the major indoor soccer league. And you had some fantastic rivalries, some great games. And I think it petered out after a while. Then eventually pro soccer, as we know it today, in the Major League Soccer, came back in 1996, and that took, I think, most of the showcase away from indoor soccer. It's still around in a number of leagues, including the Major Arena Soccer League, which, by the way, Shep Messing is a head honcho in that league. I believe he's the president of the league, if my memory serves me correctly. So what comes around goes around. Shep Messing, by the way, back in the day, backstopped the New York Arrows' first 4 MISL championships in goal. So he definitely has a history in the indoor game as well, too. It's not very many players who have seen success indoors and outdoors like Shep Messing has.
So back in the 80s and even earlier, it seemed as if America and Canada were on the same level when it comes to international play and that kind of thing. But then it seems like obviously Canada qualified in 1986, but there was a big drought and America just like took off and started qualifying all the time and really just blew Canada out of the water. But do you think Canada is finally catching up now? Obviously, they qualified for
catching up, or if not, surpass the U.S. in a number of ways too. And let's face it, it's a combination of factors. Obviously, you've got to have youngsters playing the game, lots of youngsters, talented youngsters, have proper coaching, getting an opportunity to play in local leagues, whether it's in the Canadian League or in Major League Soccer or in Europe. And you put that all together with proper coaching. And, Canada had a team to be reckoned with during World Cup qualifying, no doubt about it. I think beforehand, people were not necessarily giving the team respect because of the history. But as we've all learned, yes, it's important to understand history, but you better understand what's happening in the present. And Canada had an incredible, wonderful World Cup qualifying run, reaching Qatar, however we pronounce it these days. And I expect them to do well over there. I'm not going to say win the whole thing, but if they can get out of the group, that would be an accomplishment that I think the U.S. would definitely take as well too. So, but there's no doubt that Canada now is one of the powers of CONCACAF until proven otherwise.
So, they call you the Sea League of soccer, which I wanted to ask you about. I wanted to ask which league you follow most these days. Would it be MLS?
It's MLS just because there are teams in my backyard, so to speak. And I say backyard in quotes. There's the Red Bulls, who I've followed, covered since they were the Metro Stars in 1996. That's when the league started. And then NYCFC since that team started in 2015. And who would have ever thought that the new kids on the block would have won a national championship, an MLS Cup, before the Red Bulls would. Red Bulls are considered sort of like the Chicago Cubs of professional soccer in the United States. Although the Cub fans had to suffer for generations and like a century. So the Red Bulls have a long way to go before they could really claim what the Cubs fans and supporters had to go through over the years. But MLS is what I follow. Saying that, though, I mean, if there's a good story at another level, I will look into it and try to pursue it. Obviously, I follow the national teams, the men's and the women's. It's interesting to note that on my website, Front Row Soccer, there are days when we get a lot more hits for the national teams than we do for the local teams. It's the way it is. More people are interested nationally than locally. But like I said, if there's a good story, I don't care what level of soccer it is, whether it's youth, college, high school, amateur, pro, international, I'll pursue it if possible.
Canada now finally has its own professional league, which I think was a long time coming, and I really appreciate the fact that we have our own league now, the Canadian Premier League. But we still have 3 Canadian teams in Major League Soccer: Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. And Toronto recently brought over 3 world-class Italian players, being Insigne, Bernardeschi, and Crescito. So I wanted to ask you about that. Do you think that North American soccer is getting the respect that I would say it deserves in Europe?
I think it's starting to. I think it has in places, no doubt about it. Just more and more players are starting and playing on a regular basis, and that's what it's all about. And it's not just starting for regular first division teams, but some pretty decent ones. I've heard Canada has a pretty good player playing for Bayern Munich these days. And you need more players in those leagues, not always necessarily playing for those top teams, but playing against those top teams as well too. I'd have to figure out what year the tide started to turn. It probably happened a few years ago when American players got more respect, more Canadian players got more respect as well too. It comes down to whether or not they could perform on the field. And if they do, hey, that's where the respect comes from. And when you have more players participating in the Champions League, UEFA Champions League, that's going to make them better players because they're going to be playing under pressure, playing against the top teams in Europe. And some will do well, some will excel, and some will fall short of that. It happens with every team and every country. Not every player is going to excel, but to have players such as Weston McKennie, Christian Pulisic, Musa, I'm sorry, playing at a high level, that's so important for the success of the U.S. And like I said, it gives the U.S. much more respect.
So when did you actually first fall in love with soccer? How did that look back then?
You got a few minutes? I'll tell you. At Nassau Community College, which, by the way, is the same college that Bruce Arena went to way back in the day, I wound up taking a physical education course, soccer/bowling. Soccer we did outside, bowling we did in the winter. I just wanted to learn something new. And I got an A in the course, not because I was a great player, but because I aced the written exam. I tried on the field, showed up for every session, blah, blah, blah. I thought, okay, that was nice. I learned about the game. Wrote about soccer for the student newspaper a bit. Didn't attend any games, but did some rewrites. As a sports writer, I wanted to cover baseball. That was my favorite sport, my number one love. Football would be fine too. Basketball, hockey as well too. Just growing up with the Big Four at the time. First time at the Democrat and Chronicle, my first job, 22 years old. Just great being there. I would do anything. 2 weeks into my first year at the job, way back in the Stone Age of 1974, it was a slow night at the paper. We had like a 2-hour dinner break. Me and Tom Fitzgerald decided to go to a Lancers game. They were playing the Italian National Army team. And Rochester is such a compact city that we were able to get to the stadium in 15 minutes, no problem. Got there right before halftime, and guess what happens? A pitch invasion by the fans. The fans not only ran onto the field, they ran after their home team. They attacked their home team. And I said at the time, thank heavens, I don't have to cover this motley crew. Because one, I didn't know much about the game. And two, it looked like a train wreck. 6 months later, January 1975, I get called over to the desk of assistant sports editor Bill Parker. And he has a stack of files and papers on his desk, and he starts talking to me about the Rochester Lancers. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, my worst nightmare is happening. They liked what I had done covering high schools up to that time. They wanted to give me more responsibilities besides covering high schools and to cover a professional team, and they gave me the Lancers. I remember him pushing the file of the stack of files toward me, and he said, "Congratulations, covering your first professional team." And all I wanted to do is push it back to him. Thank you, but no thanks. Still under probation. We had a 1-year probation. I wasn't going to kill my dream job. I always wanted to be not always, but for a number of years wanted to be a sports writer. And I just said, "Oy, what have they gotten me into?" Well, I went out and learned the game. It wasn't on TV very much in the United States at the time. I did research, went to a place called Worldwide News where I bought football publications. Toronto, thank heavens, had some great stories in the Toronto Star, the Toronto Sun, the Globe and Mail, and they were reasonably priced. I bought them back in the day. Had some great mentors at the newspaper who held my hand, who had covered the team beforehand. And then bought a couple soccer books. And there's nothing like watching the game. To make a long story as short as possible, it took me 3 years before I felt comfortable with the game and before I started to really appreciate and love the game. and it just got into my blood. One of the Lancer part owners, co-owners, Nori Sabunku, said about soccer, once it gets it into your blood, it's hard to get out of it. And I thought that was a lot of malarkey. Well, guess what? He was absolutely right. And if you would have told me way back in that winter of 1975 that I would base most of my career covering this beautiful game of soccer, I would have said, what are you, crazy? What sort of alternate reality would that be? But here I am today writing about a team, writing a book about a team I didn't want to cover. I've always loved O. Henry's stories about irony, and I think that explains my professional career in so many ways. Lesson learned, embrace what you have. You never know where it's going to lead you to. Sorry for the long answer again.
No, not at all. I enjoyed that story. This book is jam-packed with information, and it serves as an amazing archive for not just people reading it now, but for future generations as well. So I guess to cap off, I wanted to ask, what is your main intention with the book for the average reader, for their takeaway? And I guess to tie into that, how is the reception of the book? Like, have you been hearing from former players and former coaches who've read it?
Well, I wanted to write it on like two accounts. One for the fans up in Rochester. They deserved something to chronicle the Lancers' story and adventures, to let them know about other things that I didn't even know about at the time. I just thought they had an interesting story to tell. I knew that maybe for the average reader, this would be way too much. My wife, who edited the book, and I think she read it 4 times, and she complained, hey, she didn't get into the games as much as what was happening between the games and the player profiles and that sort of thing, which was more interesting. But to understand the team's success and failures, you had to write about the games as well too. And I understand sometimes that could bog down the roller coaster ride, but I don't think it would be fair to say the team went through this adventure, and this adventure without putting what led to this adventure into proper context. So I understand the average reader might say, I don't care about this game, but just wait a few paragraphs and you might be laughing or cringing or whatever. So I wrote about it for the fans, but also for the Rochester fans, I should say, and the fans of today. And again, let them know that this is what soccer was like for many teams, besides the Cosmos, the Tampa Bay Rowdies, Minnesota Kicks, way back in the day. It was a struggle, no doubt about it. I've gotten good reviews, thank heavens, on Amazon from people that they enjoyed the book. Players and coaches, yes, they enjoyed it too. I mean, there's nothing like being immortalized in a book rather than in a newspaper or on the internet. Nothing wrong about that. I still make a living writing for the internet, but there's something special about a book, no doubt about it. And I still get emails from fans thanking me for writing about it, that they had forgot about this or they didn't know about this, and if they enjoyed it, that it makes me feel that I accomplished something. I understand not everyone is going to be necessarily happy about the book. I haven't heard of any bad stuff yet, but the book is an evergreen book type of thing, and I don't. It'll be difficult to pull off a Rochester Lancers Part 2 book, but I think this was enough to tell their story.
Thank you for that. And the one final question, if someone wants to purchase the book, where can they do so?
Thank you for the commercial. Yes, I have another copy of the book here too. It is only available on Amazon.com. It was published through KDP Publishing. I decided to publish it on my own because I wanted to have control of the content. I feared that if I could have found a publisher, a lot of what was in the book might not have made it, and it might have sounded like a carnival more than a history of the team. Saying that, yes, I've made money on it, no doubt about it. But you could purchase the book, Alive and Kicking, The Incredible But True Story of the Rochester Lancers, on Amazon.com. Don't confuse me with the other Michael Lewis, the one that wrote Moneyball or The Blind Side, and which, by the way, he's a talented writer. No jealousy on my part. I might be a little envious of his bank account, but that other Michael Lewis is a fabulous writer. I've read some of his work in the past. But like I said, Amazon.com, it's $25.99. I'd like to think you're going to get a bang for your buck. It's 466 pages. So it's not, like I said, a quick read, but there are some adventures. And I think you'll learn something about the team too, about the league, about soccer, and be entertained as well. And thank you for allowing me to do my little commercial.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lewis, for everything you do for the sport of soccer. And I enjoyed our talk. I learned a little bit more about the Rochester Lancers and those days, which predate me. And I'm a big soccer history nerd, I guess you could call it. I hope people enjoyed our talk as much as I did.
Well, I certainly did. I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me. And I know the word nerd, people might have a not so nice connotation about it. I am a history nerd myself. I enjoy reading about history to understand how we got to here. Soccer is one of them. American history is another. But, I think to understand where we are today, I think it's good to read about where we've been. And nothing wrong about contemporary books, too. I love books. You should see my library and my wife's library. She makes me look like a mini nerd, and I'm not calling her a nerd. I'm going to get into trouble for this, but thank you. It was a pleasure being on. Thank you.
Thank you once again. Appreciate that. Michael Lewis, Alive and Kicking.